Well, U.S. cuts in foreign aid are taking their toll on vulnerable people around the world. In one part of Africa, health centers are struggling to provide life-saving services. Schools are closing. Essential survival programs are at risk. George Thomas traveled to the Sahara Desert to bring us this first-hand report on the devastating effects.
On a rough and bumpy Sahara Desert road, a convoy pushes forward. CBN News journeyed west from the Chad-Sudan border to Farchana, home to nearly 200,000 people, including 60,000 refugees escaping Sudan's brutal civil war. At the Farchana Health Center, we meet Dr. Al-Bashir Mahamat, a once hopeful caregiver who now struggles against overwhelming despair.
The impact of the financial cuts from the American government have been huge because it affects all of our services.
Dr. Mahamat explains the clinic, designed for 10,000, now serves 6 times that number. Weeks ago, he learned about the loss of USAID funding, a lifeline for women and children here struggling with malnutrition.
We've had to reduce the number of personnel, which means a greater workload. My big worry is that if these services are no longer available, then these children will not survive.
The clinic's operations are also supported by World Vision, a Christian aid organization that recently helped bring fresh water to the health center, all thanks to private donations. Now, even World Vision is deeply concerned about the future here.
The U.S. has been a leader in the world for many years in terms of helping the poor and serving the most vulnerable. Any administration should be able to take time to review their programs. The challenge is when those programs are suspended, then critical life-saving activities, food support, vaccinations for kids, support for malnourished children, all these activities are critically needed.
Hello, class.
At a nearby refugee school for Sudanese children,
Yes.
today Abdul Rashid is doing his passion, teaching English to these young Sudanese children. One of his biggest concerns today is the issue of funding from the United States. The fact that the USAID has cut its funding to the school has had a tremendous impact. For several years, U.S. aid paid for an accelerated program for the camp's brightest students. When the Trump administration slashed 90% of the organization's global foreign contracts, the support vanished.
When the accelerated program got cut, most of the students left the school and headed to Libya. Some went to Europe. Others died at sea trying to cross the Mediterranean. Some were even kidnapped by the RSF and forced to fight. That's why the decision to stop the U.S. aid funding is so upsetting.
Shula says America's help has played a crucial role in fighting poverty and hunger around the world. And that support has been a cornerstone of the nation's soft power.
I think it's critical that the U.S. government continue to be out in the world and doing good things for populations in need. I think it makes us all safer, more secure, and more prosperous.
For millions on this continent, U.S. intervention has meant the difference between life and death. For people like Florence Makumina, that support through the U.S. President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, or PEPFAR, saved her life when she was diagnosed with HIV.
The departure of donors and donor funding is a major setback. We are like orphans, we have no one to turn to. All the gains are being reversed. We are going back to the old days when being HIV positive was equated to death.
As PEPFAR teeters on the edge, fears of a deadly reversal are growing.
If the U.S. assistance for HIV is not restored, there will be an additional, in the next 4 years, 6.3 million AIDS-related deaths.
Food assistance, too, is on the brink of collapse.
We are afraid for our lives. Those who are strong may manage to work, but the rest of us will suffer in silence.
Hile Sige, one of nearly 3 million Ethiopians in the Tigray region depending on U.S. aid, now faces a devastating reality.
no food for the next 3 months. Ethiopia, once the largest recipient in sub-Saharan Africa, has now seen all support stopped.
Going without nourishment for even 1 day is difficult, much less for 90 days. Consequently, we fear that we are destined for death.
We're all for good stewardship. But we have to remember that if we begin to cut and slash indiscriminately, these are men, women, and children created in the image and likeness of God.
Reverend Gabriel Salquero, a missionary to Zambia, Tanzania, and Malawi, has seen firsthand the impact of U.S. support. He is one of the few evangelical voices challenging the Trump administration's decision to slash foreign aid.
As a pastor, I take seriously the call of Jesus. I was hungry and you fed me, naked and you clothed me. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. And part of the work of USAID is collaborating with Christian organizations and others to provide this very real ministry of Christ.
Back at the refugee camp, Abdul Rashid shares a warning about the future.
Since there is no hope of getting an education here, many students are trying to migrate to Europe and America. Not everyone who wants to go there is a good person with good intentions. I guarantee there will be problems in the future. This crisis could turn into a security problem, and it will end up costing the West more than what it would cost them to fund the education here in the camp.
George Thomas, CBN News, Farchana, Eastern Chad.
Well, I'm all for efficiency when you look at the reports, and it's just amazing how many sort of political families were part of USAID and recipients for their charities that they had started. You look at all of that and you kind of shake your head what in the world was going on and who was minding it. But at the same time, particularly when you look at sub-Saharan Africa and just the basic necessity of food, the basic of can we prevent the spread of AIDS? Can we treat people with AIDS so that they don't die? All of this was put in place by the Bush administration in one of the great humanitarian moves of my lifetime, that yes, we would extend the help needed to stop that. And to see it all cease and sort of no regard for it. Again, I'm all for efficiency, and there should have been, but if you're going to completely shut it down, you've got to realize there is a tremendous cost on the other end of that pipeline. People who will go without food, people who will go without medication, people who will go without education. Just a piece of advice for nonprofits. I put this in place with Operation Blessing, CBN International, a long time ago. We can work in cooperation with government programs, but we should never be the recipient, because you never know when it's going to be shut down, and you never know if there are going to be political, ideological strings attached to that money. It's much better as a Christian organization to be dependent solely on God for provision. You can work in cooperation, but when you get dependent on the government and then the government's no longer there, well, now you're in trouble. Well, when you're dependent on God, God's always there. So here's a tremendous opportunity. If you're in Christian ministry, if you're a church, could you consider what can we do for food aid for Africa? What can we do to restore the medicines? The numbers are huge, but can we do our part? I'm not asking you to take the whole thing on, but can you do some research and find out who's doing work there? You just saw what World Vision is doing in the refugee area of Chad, right next to that civil war with Sudan. How can we step up and say, yes, we want to reach out? The least of these, they're made in the image of God. Can we give them food? Can we give them water? Can we give them shelter? Can we do these things? And in that, fulfill the law of Christ, which is to love one another.